Welcome back to Will, a Wonderful World. Last time we were still stuck with Youngmin and Baekya's tricky situation. And then we got two more letters. One from Li Wen and one from Alicia. It's the first time we've had the two paired together, so let's take a look. The simulation exam was only hours away, yet I'd been lying in bed all night, unable to fall asleep. Yeah, I know that feeling. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the sketch that Mr. Wen had drawn of me earlier. It was so beautiful. I thought that I should go to school earlier to try and find it in the trash can. Oh yeah, regrets. Funny how they work. Shouldn't have ripped it up, huh? I got out of bed, walked across the living room, and grabbed the box of chocolate milk that Rocky had paid me. The moon seemed especially round tonight. I leaned on the railing of the balcony, watching the moon and drinking the milk. Mr. Wen's place was to my right. The light was still on. Well, it's good to know that Mr. Wen can now afford electricity. Ever since I had learned that Mr. Wen lived next door, I would often involuntarily wander onto the balcony to watch the view outside. However, I had never seen him out here, even once. The curtain was always closed behind the glass door to Mr. Wen's living room. I couldn't see anything inside, except to tell whether the lights were on or not. It was almost 1 a.m. The lights were still on. I didn't think that he could be up so late, despite his lights usually still being on when I had gone to bed in the past. What was he doing at this hour? It couldn't be because of what had happened earlier today? It had only been a joke. I suppose that I should go and apologize tomorrow. I suddenly heard a muffled sound. Then I noticed that his curtain moved slightly and saw a hand appear at the bottom of the glass door. It was Mr. Wen's hand. Murder? Shut up. What was I thinking? I immediately called for an ambulance while I knocked on his door, but nobody responded. No one answered the phone in the manager's office either. I heard that people could pass out for many reasons, but the best opportunity for first aid only lasted for the first 5 minutes. It might be too late to wait for the ambulance to arrive. I grabbed the rope on the balcony and tied one end around my waist. Wait, you what? Li Wen's an action girl. I tied the other end to the railing. Finally, I climbed up the railing and stood on top of it, shaking. Mr. Wen's balcony was approximately 1.5 meters away. My own record in long jump was 1.72 meters, if I remembered correctly. I should be alright then. 1, 2, 3, jump! The slipper had been tossed on the ground earlier. Damn it! I was so close to reaching the pipe on the other side. It was hanging between the 3rd and 4th floors. I'm a little confused what this line means. Does it mean her slipper fell off first? The rope tightened around my waist. Thankfully, it was strong enough to hold me. I could still make it. I held onto the rope for dear life, carefully untied the knot, and jumped onto the balcony on the 3rd floor. However, nobody seemed to be home. It took 20 minutes for the paramedics to get me off of the 3rd floor balcony. By then, it was already too late for Mr. Wen. Wait, why did they have to get you off the 3rd floor balcony first? Shouldn't you have yelled at them to go to Mr. Wen's door first? I watched helplessly as they carried him onto the ambulance. He looked like he was only taking a nap. I suddenly had a feeling of deja vu of the day I lost my father. No. No! I love this action music for her. Well, Li Wen has problems again. And this time we can't go all the way back to the origin of the problems. Which was probably that she shattered Mr. Wen's already poor self-esteem by tearing that drawing of her to pieces. So I'm guessing what we can change for her is how, whether or not she'll be able to make that jump. Won't actually know until we see Alicia's side of the story, though. So let's take a look. If someone asked me what I wanted most at that exact moment, I would say freedom. As for the thing I wanted second most, I would say death. 2 months ago, a short and skinny old man had bought me from a human trafficking auction house and brought me back to his mansion. At first, I thought he was just like most of the other buyers, who had only been looking for some exotic playthings. But I soon found out that he was much more frightening. His name was Money Jia, an infamous local millionaire in Hong Kong. On the surface, he was the owner of a chemical plant, making his bucks from pharmaceutical research and development. But behind the scenes, he had been conducting drug tests on humans. And the tests were not just limited to medicinal drugs, but also experimental ones that were developed solely for the gangs, some of which were even from abroad, some of which might be in Korea? What he had spent in buying us was nothing compared to the profits he could make off of us. All of his test subjects were people he had purchased from the auction house. None of us had any legal status. Therefore, nobody would care who we were or where we had gone. It was like we had evaporated from the face of the earth. There were both men and women among us. Sometimes the woman might get a little lucky compared to the men. If the girls were willing to become a concubine, they could be spared the fate of trying the more dangerous drugs. Rose had been one of the concubines. She had still died, though. I heard she had OD'd. After her death, Her body was taken away like everyone else before her. She just disappeared without a trace. I would rather die from poison than become another Rose. The people who had made the same choice as I were all locked inside the dungeon. All locked. They had tied our hands and feet to the bedposts, with our limbs spread out unnaturally. Everyone had been tied down in a separate room. However, the air ducts in the rooms were all connected. The air was filled with the smell of rotten flesh and death. Every few minutes, I could hear horrifying screams coming from the distance. I had endured a fever for the last couple of days. I heard them saying that the drug they had been giving me was defective, and if my fever didn't come down soon, I would die. To make sure that they could extract as much profit out of me as they could, they had assigned a new doctor. He had been checking up on me every day. This doctor seemed more bookish. He might be a good man. In my haze, I tried to talk to him. He never responded. So I kept talking to myself. After setting up my IV drip, the doctor hung the bottle of medicine on a makeshift pole that had been made out of a rusty water pipe. Then his phone rang. He walked to the hallway outside and half closed the door. His medicine kit was near my pillow. There were 2 bottles in the corner of the kit. One with sleeping pills, one with poison. The doctor was still answering the phone outside. The day had finally come. If I could just grab that bottle, I could carry out the plan I'd had in my mind for a long time. The rope was loose. I think I'm getting a sense of how we're going to solve Li Wen's problem. I grabbed the pipe firmly. I wiggled my left hand out of the loosened rope and reached for the kit. I grabbed the bottle closer to my left hand, the sleeping pills. I twisted the cap off with my left hand and poured the entire bottle into my mouth. It was so painful. Then I lifted the pipe and smashed it down on my own head. I could finally end this life in hell. Carlos, I'm sorry. You or Alicia can't take care of you anymore. Goodbye forever, Carlos. I didn't know how long had passed. I was so surprised when I woke up. I had an oxygen mask on my face and IV tubes inserted into my arms. Some familiar guards and doctors were standing next to the bed. They had tied my hands and feet to the bedposts. The air was still filled with that rotten smell. I closed my eyes in desperation. Heavenly Father, what have I done wrong? You know, out of all the stories we've experienced so far, my heart has broken the most at Park Sang-gun's. But honestly, Alicia just keeps having it worse and worse. I have an idea of how how to solve Alicia's problems. Gear. I presume, unfortunately for her, that the way we solve her problems will involve her not getting that temporary release. But let's take a look. Yep, there we go. Okay. Well, here we are. There's a clear mention of a pipe for Li Wen, so pipes go in there. The only thing we can change are these things. We can't really change this because they won't come here, and they have to be in that set order. Ooh, sorry about that. I feel like if the rope is loose for Li Wen, then she can reach the pipe and grab it firmly. But maybe if we have I grab the pipe firmly, then Alicia can still sort of be free. And I don't know what she's going to do with the slipper, but I feel like it's pointless to keep it with Li Wen. So let's give this combination of events a go. Maybe she'll take the slipper and use it as a chancla. The wind was strong that night. I held onto the pipe and climbed up to Mr. Wen's balcony. Mr. Wen had fallen to the ground in his living room. I could barely feel his pulse, and he wasn't breathing. I immediately ran through everything I had learned about CPR in my head. I put both of my hands together, placed them upon his chest, and began pressing. 1, 2, 3. I used as much strength as I could with every press. I just hoped that I wasn't too weak to save his life. After 30 presses, Mr. Wen showed no sign of waking up, and he was still not breathing. I lifted his chin up and started doing mouth-to-mouth to him. 2 sets of mouth-to-mouth, followed by 30 presses on his chest. I kept repeating this routine. Mr. Wen's forehead was covered in tiny drops of sweat. His wet hair was stuck to the corners of his eyes. Why won't you wake up? Time kept passing. It had been way over 5 minutes, but I wouldn't stop. Hope was like a flickering light on a single candle. I couldn't tell when it would suddenly go out. My tears and sweat were mixing together and falling on Mr. Wen's shirt, drop after drop, making it wet. A rough hand grabbed my wrist. Mr. Wen's eyes slowly opened. I didn't know why I cried. I must have looked horrible with my ugly crying face. A few minutes later, the paramedics finally arrived. They asked what kind of first aid I had given him. I suddenly realized what I had just done, and I couldn't get a word out. I just did that with Mr. Wen. With our mouths, didn't I? The ambulance had taken Mr. Wen away. The paramedics told me to bring some necessities for his hospital stay. I finally calmed down, and for the first time, I had the chance to look around Mr. Wen's apartment. There were all sorts of paintings hanging on the walls. A small seaside town glowing in the sunset. A golden wheat field stretching endlessly. A rainbow crossing a valley through rosy clouds after the rain. They were all masterpieces. Weirdly though, according to the signatures, most of them were from over 10 years ago. A portrait of a woman attracted my attention. The woman seemed to be in her early 20s. Her long black hair spread out on a soft white pillow. Her sleeping face looked mesmerizing, even to me. Was she Mr. Wen's wife? I remembered when Rocky had asked whether Mr. Wen had a girlfriend on his first day. He hadn't answered the question. Why was he living alone then? Right. I should be collecting necessities for Mr. Wen. Speaking of which, what did one need for a hospital stay anyway? Pajamas, underwear, toothbrush, toothpaste, towel, slippers, razor, face wash, napkins. I scoured the kitchen and the bathroom thoroughly. The only door left had to be the door to the bedroom. I should be able to find a change of clothes in it. I pushed the door open. To my surprise, what was behind the door looked exactly like what had often appeared in my dreams. It was a graveyard. A graveyard of paintings. Torn apart, painted over, pieces so small that they were completely unrecognizable. The remains of various paintings nearly completely filled the room. In a corner of the room, some blankets lay on the floor, with some clothes folded on top of them. Oh yeah, there's Li Wen in the corner. Was this where Mr. Wen usually spent the night? This room made me feel nothing but sadness and utter despair. They were so much alike, Mr. Wen and he. I wiggled my left hand out of the loosened rope and reached for the kit. I grabbed the bottle closer to my left hand, the sleeping pills. It was almost the size of half my palm. I needed to hide it somewhere. I saw the slipper that I had dropped yesterday when I was having a seizure. It was close enough for me to reach it. Now that makes sense. The doctor came back from his phone call. I was still lying on the bed, all spread out and with my eyes closed, mumbling quietly to myself, just as he had left me. He felt my forehead with his hand, fiddled with the IV a bit, closed his kit, and left. I opened my eyes when I heard the door close. The bottle of sleeping pills was still safely hidden inside the slipper. I know that as long as I do my best, my dream will come true. What's your dream now, Alicia? I mean, we got the right guess for both, but that's been the recurring line for Alicia, huh? As long as I do my best, my dream will come true. She's been having some nightmares. And it... So we've gotten the vague information that Li Wen's father has died. But we didn't find out why. It sounds like her dad might also suffered rather from depression. I will say I am very glad that the as reasonable as this sudden romantic comedy burst is, considering Li Wen's a teenager, I am glad that they moved away from it just as quickly. With that said though, this still had nothing to do with Gyeongmin and Kang Baekya's stalemate here. So I guess we're going to have to see what these letters bring us next time. Before that though, it's been a while since we've checked the profiles. Let's see what new information we have. Carlos joined the Black Dragon Gang, but we knew that already. I'm genuinely not sure what the new information here is. Maybe it's just voice lines.
¿Por qué me pasan este tipo de cosas? Porque siempre me pasa esto. Porque siempre me pasan este tipo de cosas.
Yes, okay. It probably was the voice lines. Alicia's dossier reads, terribly. At 12, witnessed both parents killed in a house robbery. Sent to the blank orphanage in Montlalok with her younger brother from their home in Coatepec. Kidnapped at 18, kidnapped and taken onto a human trafficking ship, escaped in Hong Kong. At 18, started working in Hong Kong at a coffee shop named Maple House, and then at 19, kidnapped from Maple House and sold off in an underground auction house. Well, that tells us the progression of time, but also at 19 was used as a test subject, unwillingly, for experimental drugs. Like the only good thing here is Maple House. And there's one before that too, jeez. What happened before 12? Wen Zhao Ren tells us exactly what happened in his profile. He fainted due to exhaustion, discovered and saved in time by a neighbor. Can you revive someone from exhaustion with CPR? It is good to know that it wasn't a suicide attempt. And Kang Baekya. We've had a lot of information about Kang Baekya since. For example, we now have Choi Yo-han in here, his old rival. His son Choi Do-sung was killed by Min Jun. And then, right now, where we're stuck at is, at 29, he planned a secret rescue mission to free a colleague, with Chang Gyeong-min joining halfway through the operation. However, the mission still failed and he was killed alongside the hostage and Chang. That can't be right. His story can't end there. We still have like all these lines left. So next time, hopefully whatever's in here is going to help with this. For now, though, have a good night. Remember, God can't fix all your problems. But it's sure as hell not for lack of trying. We'll see you next time.